Okay, my dearest folks, you've all joined me for a ring-ding-ding-a-ling Yuletide snack bonanza. We're going to make a miraculous number of delightful treats in this very kind of short class, but it's going to be dope. This is just for making delightful holiday treats. So, for those of you who might be cooking along with the class, here's what you've got to start off with. You should have your oven set to 220 degrees. We're baking a couple things today at a couple different oven temperatures, which if you have like dual ovens and you want to have one set for 220 and one set higher, that's great. I don't have two ovens, so I can't do none of that. The other thing you might want to get started with off the bat is having a double boiler set up. Oopies, so this is my double boiler. You don't have to have something like purpose built like this though. Like simply just having a pot with some water that's kind of simmering there and then putting a bowl over it is fine. I just like this set because it has like a steamer basket or something to use as a double boiler, so it's kind of handy. So have that set up so that you can melt your chocolate chips. And for those of you who are cooking along with the class and have never cooked along with one of my classes before, one great thing to do is kind of like mise en place all of your ingredients, like have things pre-measured, and then it's a lot easier to keep pace with the class. Of course, you can just follow this class later whenever the heck you want, and you've got all the recipes, and I love ya. So, for most of this past year, I was not really encouraging people to cook along with the class because I think for some people it's like stressful to do that. But feel free to do it if you want, because I think some people don't find it to be stressful and find it to be fun. Anyway, so what we're going to do is we're going to start one of these things off the bat because it needs to chill. And that is going to be these Sambuca cookies. We're going to just start by melting the chocolate chips and the coconut butter in our double boiler here. So main thing is to make sure that the double boiler is dry itself. That's why if you are using a pot with a bowl on top of it, instead of like a purpose-built thing like this, it's nice to make sure that that bowl is a bit wider than the pot so that there's no chance for moisture to get into the chocolate. You know, with chocolate, that introduction of moisture to the chocolate can make it seize up. In this case, it's not like super imperative because we're making a cookie dough out of it anyway. So there's other liquids that are going to come in contact with it, but it's kind of like a generally best practice with chocolate just to keep it from both having liquid introduced into it, and also like the whole reason we're doing this double boiler thing is because chocolate itself like burns very easily. So this way, you know, the flame itself is like barely on, and then it's really getting heated just from the steam. So it's a very gentle way to actually melt the chocolate. And what we're going to do once you have that set up is I'm going to move this onto just a back burner because we're going to, while this all melts, start making our popcorn for the caramel corn. And I'll tell you one thing, is that popcorn is like maybe 3/4 of the bottom of the entire food pyramid in my reality. Like I just eat popcorn and drink yerba mate. That's like kind of my main jam in life. It was actually the first thing I even learned how to cook. I was like 8 years old or something, and I always watched my dad making like stovetop popcorn, and he would do it like in a frying pan and just put like a big metal bowl over it and pop it that way. And my parents were out one night and I made it myself, like trying to remember how my dad did it. And I think I used like a cup of cooking oil or something ridiculous, but like I got like a handful of popcorn and I was like, I learned how to cook, okay. So it's still like maybe once a week I eat like a giant bowl of popcorn because I love it. Anyway, let's go ahead and make this popcorn. So like I say, I'm just gonna move this onto a back burner. And then my preference, I mean, if you already mise en place everything, you might already have your popcorn done. I'm gonna now do this in a Dutch oven, which works way better than what my dad used to do with the frying pan. And I just kind of eyeball the amount of oil. You could use a variety of different oils that you like. You could use coconut butter. I don't really like popping it in margarine. Some people like that buttery flavor. I don't think it cooks as well, so I usually just use olive oil or coconut oil, and just like kind of enough to coat the bottom of it. You don't really need, you know, for like a Dutch oven this size, maybe like a tablespoon or 4 teaspoons is all you need. And then the variety of popcorn you might want to use, there's a few different things. This is like really the stuff to use for making caramel corn or kettle corn, this mushroom or ball style popcorn that pops in like a ball kind of shape. So we can do that. I mean, this is like a testament to how much of a popcorn eater I am. Like, this is full at some times of my, like, I have like 4 different kinds of popcorn in my kitchen right now. It's like kind of demented. But yeah, we'll use this this mushroom, and it's not like made with mushrooms. It's just like a different variety of corn that when it implodes, it forms that kind of ball shape, which is like a little ideal for caramel corn. So you just want to like kind of a little more than cover the bottom of the pan. A little more than that. Yep. And then cover it. And, you know, basically the deal with making popcorn, it's so crazy. It's like the only food that implodes when you make it. It like goes inside out. You know, each kernel of the popcorn, like there's a tiny, tiny bubble of air in there that, like, you know, the popcorn, when it dries, it like hardens around that bubble. And, you know, just heating it, like what causes it to go inside out is that difference of pressure and like the transformation of the minimal amount of moisture that's still in the popcorn kernel, which is, I think it's so trippy. Like, I don't know any other foods that you want to turn them inside out to eat them, but it really makes my imagination go wild. So the thing about using a Dutch oven for this, and you may be able to hear, it's already starting to pop a little bit. I really like a Dutch oven for making stovetop popcorn because these cast iron ones are really nice and thick, right? And you don't have to like keep moving it to prevent it from burning. Like as it pops, the popcorn itself will kind of mix itself up and prevent any kind of sticking and burning. And because it's very thick, that heat really like radiates all around, and it's just foolproof, like easy popcorn making, just using a cast iron Dutch oven for it. And you should have on hand like a big mixing bowl like this to toss it all in when it's done. The other thing that we're going to get on hand right now is the actual caramel for making this. Can you all hear the popcorn a-poppin'? It's popping. So this is like the key indicator to listen for if you're making, like you could totally make this if you just got unsalted, not fresh popcorn, like bagged popcorn that was unsalted. You could use that if you were just trying to like cut any corners, but it's so easy. Like I'm not even touching it and it's just like popping the corn for me. I have Orville Redenbacher at my beck and call right here on my kitchen stove. Yes, the caramel. Let's go ahead and make said caramel. So there's a few things that we're gonna need for it. We're gonna start with some margarine, a little maple syrup, and some evaporated cane juice, or you could use regular sugar, a little bit of rum, some nutmeg, salt, vanilla, and baking powder. You'll see why we need baking powder in just a second. So this is almost done. You know, the key thing to listen to is the frequency at which the pops are happening, kind of like exponentially drops off once it's done. You'll also see less steam escaping from the side, and that's kind of how you know what the heck is going on in Popcorn University. It's a college for popcorn to attend when it grows up and gets really smart. So while that's almost done, yeah, this is about done. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and turn that off. Oh, this needs another second, actually. Sorry, I was lying. I'm going to just let that cook for a moment more. And in the meantime, we can go ahead and start cooking all this caramel down. We're just going to start first with the margarine and let that melt before we add other stuff. And oops. There we go. So we're going to go ahead and let that start to melt. That way you're not putting the sugar in direct contact with the pan and chancing that it might burn. You want that like melted fat first in the pan. And I mean, as long as it's melted enough that the bottom is covered, you could go ahead and like throw in all the other stuff now. You just don't want the sugar to just be like directly in the contact with the pan and burning or anything like that. So I'm going to go ahead and start adding all these things. Sugar or evaporated cane juice, which, you know, the evaporated cane juice is just a minimally processed sugar. It's the juice from sugar cane, which has been like either boiled or evaporated in sunlight. And that's like a very minimal way of processing sugar. You know, like there's all different kinds of like chemical treatments and bleaching that some sugars undergo. That's our vanilla. And so I prefer personally for like the granulated sweetener of my choices to use evaporated cane juice just because it's a little bit more on the natural side. And here's our salt. And now we're just going to let that cook. Like all we really need to do here is just mix it once or twice so that there's no clumps of sugar or anything. But otherwise we can kind of let it go on its own. And this bubbling you're seeing now, like you want it to be bubbling but just slightly darkening. Now, the thing with making caramel corn is it kind of cooks twice, right? The caramel itself, once on the stovetop, like right now, and the other time once it's on the popcorn in the oven, right? And that's why it's kind of important that we don't overcook it at this step and we don't have the oven on too high of a temperature, because then the caramel itself is going to burn as you cook the popcorn, which that's going to be terrible tasting and everybody's going to cry. So we're not going to do that. This is just about where we want it to be already. Like it doesn't need to be super scientific. A lot of caramel making, you do want to be like, get the candy thermometer out. But this is like, we're just looking to get this kind of pale brownness to it. And I'm just making kind of a small batch of this. Here's the thing, before we now add this to the popcorn though, this is when our baking powder comes in, right? And this is like a little bit the secret to this style of caramel, because when the baking powder reacts to the caramel, look how this gets like super creamy. You guys see that? Oh man, it's like such a crazy, look, it's all super foamy now, and it's just like great for making things like caramel corn with. So over here we got our popcorn, and I'm just making a smaller batch than the size that is in the recipe, so don't worry about why this bowl is like only half full. That's not important. That's part of a government secret conspiracy that we don't have to talk about. But main thing is to just keep this moving. Just toss it up. You can mix it with a spoon if you want. And then we're going to go ahead and lay this out onto a baking pan lined with parchment paper. So I really like these like pre-cut parchment papers that are like the perfect size to a pan. It makes it like really fast to just grab it. And then just want to kind of lay it out. It will be like crazy hot, so you don't really have to do it with your bare hands unless you're crazy. And then we're going to pop that right into the oven. And remember, the oven is at 220, which is pretty darn low. Low enough that like you can make this and then like go take a shower or do whatever and come back in like 20 minutes and not have to worry about it burning. So into the oven it goes. And in the meantime, I think our chocolate, we'll find, is melted enough. So you can still see there's some like semblance of shape of chocolate chips. But if you mix it, they should already break down pretty quickly into like almost like a ganache type of consistency. That's actually one of the reasons that both for this and for the matzo crack recipe that we're doing today, I've recommended using like miniature sized chocolate chips because they just melt a lot faster. Both of these recipes use melted chocolate. So, I mean, the smaller the pieces of chocolate, the quicker they melt. So, for this recipe now, we're going to need the rest of our ingredients that we're mixing this chocolate into, right? So, give me 1 second here. Got flour. Sorry if the camera's maybe a little bit tightly cropped here. Egg replacer powder, which is basically a mixture of starches. It's tapioca starch and potato starch usually. And it works really good for a variety of eggish purposes. You can even really whip it into a nice meringue with peaks or use it for making royal icing and stuff like that. It's pretty handy stuff as long as it's like in something that masks that starchiness. It's not like a terrible flavor. It's not like you're using like chickpea flour or something that's like in many cases not pleasant. It's okay stuff. It just, you need flavor. So that's what we're going to add to it. Then we've got evaporated cane juice again, or again, you can use regular old sugar if you're that kind of person. This is Sambuca, which is like a kind of anisey liqueur. And then we've got baking powder and salt. So we're just going to go ahead and add all these dry ingredients together. And the thing that we're not adding in at this time is the powdered sugar. The powdered sugar is going to go on afterwards, like right before we bake it. So this is going to be very loose at first, which is why the recipe calls for actually chilling it for a while. What I'm going to do, just because this is like, a class and we're doing this in a limited amount of time, is I'm just going to actually pour this onto a tray and pop it in my freezer for a little while, because being a little bit thinner and being a little bit colder, it will chill up faster, and then we'll be able to form cookies out of it during the course of this class. But I think it's a little bit better to just pop it in the fridge if you have the time. And it's totally something like you could even make the cookie dough in the morning and then form the cookies themselves in the evening or something, like pop it in your fridge and go to work, or pop it in the fridge and make it in the morning or whatever. But yeah, that's kind of what we're looking for. It's like almost like a soft brownie dough-ish type of joint. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and just pop that in my fridge. Give me just one moment. All right. Anybody got any questions already, or problems or issues, or you don't like Christmas treats? Somebody forced you at gunpoint to take this darn class. That's what. Do you all have also, this is a very critical thing for these classes, do you have a delightful beverage you're sipping? Some tea, some yerba mate, any other type of liquid that is delightful? Somebody's got a cup of something that looks like a tea or hot chocolate or something. That's nice. That's what you should do. Okay, so we're making two other things. Uh, First, we're going to get started just mixing up the granola because we got to wait for the oven anyway, right? Ooh, blueberry lavender matcha. That sounds pretty fancy right there. That sounds okay. So we're going to mix up our granola so that when the oven is ready to be turned up to a higher temperature, it's like all ready to go. And this is mad easy. All right, here's what we got to do. It's a Brazil nut cranberry granola. And I really, really like making homemade granola a lot. Like I almost always have some type of homemade granola on hand, whether it's a raw granola or a baked one like this. And it's really like one of the all-time most delightful like food fragrances you can have going on in your kitchen. Um, it's just very pleasant, and I think it makes like a really nice, easy holiday gift. Like granola doesn't start to suck like 48 hours after you made it or something like that, like some cookies do or some baked goods do. It's something that can be like good for a month or more, right? And it's really easy to churn out a big batch of it. Like you could easily multiply this recipe by 4 or 8 and make like a jar of granola for everybody you work with or whatever. Like it's very easy also to tweak different fun ways. Like you don't like Brazil nuts, like okay, you could make this with pecans. You could like, instead of the orange zest, you could, use some other flavorings that you like more, other spices, put cardamom in it. Well, there's cardamom already in this one, but you get what I'm saying. It's very easy to make like a very pleasant and healthy breakfasty thing that you can give people. And people are not used to homemade granola. Like all they ever eat is Captain Crunch right out of an old man's shoe in the New York City subway system. They don't know about delightful granola. It's going to hit them by surprise like a Mack truck full of granola. All right, anyway, so we got all these things. So Brazil nuts, these ones I just like pulsed in the food processor because I actually really like in granola for there to be like some variety in like the texture, right? Some of it's like closer to a meal and there's some like bigger pieces, and I kind of like that. You could just like chop them by hand if you wanted instead. Again, you could like substitute out the Brazil nuts for any quantity, any same quantity of a different kind of nut if you wanted to do pecans or walnuts. Same with the dried fruit that's in here. If you didn't want to do, figs and cranberries, you could totally substitute this out for like goji berries and Hunza raisins or mulberries, any chopped up dried apricots. There's lots of fun ways you could tweak this to be like even more to your taste. So that's the Brazil nuts. These are the pumpkin seeds. I like these green like pepitas for making granola with. They're also really nice to have on hand just to like toast up to put on salads or even to like garnish an entree with if you like, pan fry them with a little bit of rosemary and sea salt and stuff. There's lots of fun ways to use them. I also like this really like large shred dried coconut. A lot of the dried coconut that's available at health food stores, I find to be semi-terrible. Like it's very finely ground, and I find like eating it is sort of like eating sawdust. It's not usually like super flavorful, and I don't generally love the texture of it. So the dried coconut I like the most. I tend to get at like Indian grocery stores. They tend to have a large variety, like a very wide variety of different grades of coconut. You can get the chips there a lot of times, the big flakes of coconut that are good for making coconut bacon with. So that's what I like to do. The quick oats, again, if you don't have quick oats and you just have regular oats, just pulse them a little bit in a food processor to break them down a little bit. That's basically what quick oats are. All oats are, other than like the whole oat oats, are rolled to be flattened like this. And the quick oats are just rolled a little bit thinner and broken up a little bit so they cook more quickly. I don't particularly find regular oats to be like that time consuming to cook, but everybody has a different standard, I suppose. Maple syrup is my sweetener of choice for this recipe. I think it's just very tasty. You could totally substitute it out for agave nectar. Fresh grated orange zest. You could use like a box grater, or what I really like is to use a microplane for getting citrus zest off. As you can see from this citrus zest, there's very little of that white, like pithy stuff. It's just really that most external layer of the orange that's like rich in the oils of the orange that give it that flavor. And, you know, just this little bit of orange zest gives this a nice orange flavor without introducing a lot more liquid, like adding actual orange juice to the recipe would. Cardamom, there are so many freaking good cardamoms available. And I'm totally going to be a shill about this because I just love the stuff they make. But I'm really, really partial to these like burlap and barrel spices. And these are a couple different cardamoms that they have. They're banging. Like I don't normally recommend a whole lot of products to you guys because I'm not trying to like advertise to you. But I really, really love the spices they make. And I think they like you can very much tell that they care deeply and like over the top about the quality of spices. Like they travel to like the furthest reaches of the planet to find like one specific cinnamon or one like very special variety of chili pepper. And that's certainly the case with this stuff. It's like, it's crazy, crazy good. This Cloud Forest one is bomb. And a lot of ground cardamoms aren't great. Like generally when I use cardamom, I use the whole pod, like the whole cardamom pod, and then remove it. A lot of ground dried cardamom can be kind of like weak in flavor, and I don't find that to be the case with the burlap and barrel stuff. So check their stuff out if you've never had their spices, because they all like kind of blow my mind. Every time I get one of their spices, I'm like, wow, that's the best whatever it is that I've ever tried. Or so yeah, their stuff is banging. Anyway, so let's go ahead and grab a mixing bowl to put this here granola together with. All right. So yeah, this is seriously easy. Just have a clean mixing bowl, and all these here things are going to go into said mixing bowl. And very easy to modify this. Like if you have somebody who's like allergic to tree nuts and you want to do something like sunflower seeds or pine nuts, which are technically not a nut, they're a seed of, you know, the pine tree. It's very easy to just substitute them out for whichever other thing you'd like. Here's that maple syrup. And a little bit of oil. And then all we got to do is just kind of mix this together so that it's well hydrated. And the fruits I like to really put on after this comes out of the oven. That's kind of the case with just about any granola I'll make, except for if you're making a granola that uses like fresh fruit that you're basically drying out by cooking it with the granola. Like for instance, like if you have an overabundance of like really great mangoes and you want to, what I would suggest doing for that is like dicing it up super, super small so that when you do bake it, the moisture really comes out of it. Because that's what is going to give granola like a poor keeping quality, is if there's stuff in it that's still very moist, you know? You really want to bake it so that it's all nice and crispy. Otherwise it will get mold growing on it. So that's what we're looking like all mixed up. And you can also do things with granola, like add stuff that gives it a little bit more of like a clumpiness to it. Like if you like that, you know, like the way processed cereal can be like little kind of nuggets of stuff. You could add a little bit of flax meal into this, or a little bit of wheat germ into it, or some other type of meal, almond meal, for instance, to give it a little bit more of that kind of mouthfeel. So while we're waiting for the oven, I'm just going to go ahead and spread this out onto a tray to bake. And you just want it to be in like a thin, even layer. Okay, yeah, like that. All right. And I'm just going to put this to the side. Give me just a moment to rinse my hands and we will keep going. All right, so the other thing that we're going to need to make kind of a caramel for is this matzo crack, right? And we're going to start off with these 5 pieces of matzah. You can use unsalted ones or salted ones. Just don't use like everything bagel flavored or anything wacky like that. To be honest, I think that's a crime. You can't, everything, no, you just got, it's just only plain. I will tell you this. Don't use that shmura matzah, if you know what that is. That's just unpleasant. That's the bread of our affliction, and you should never consume that unless you're being held at knife point. It is a really unpleasant type of matzah, but some people really like swear by that. So if you like that, that's nice. Good on you. All right, so you got that matzah, and then we're also going to make kind of a caramel out of, this is a cup of margarine. And like we did before, we're going to melt the margarine at least somewhat in a pan before we go ahead and add the sugar. That way the sugar does not scorch. And also, you know, this caramel, we're adding significantly less in the way of other forms of moisture to it. So we really can't risk that sugar getting burnt. What you can do though to make it like melt a little faster, like this is a little bit cool because when I teach these classes, I just teach the class with my windows open so that, you know, sometimes like otherwise my cameras overheat and stuff like that. So my margarine's still a little bit cold, but it's melting pretty good and fast. So once that is, once that's melted enough, we're just going to add this evaporated cane juice. It's a cup of it, and a tiny little bit of molasses here. And that kind of just gives it more of that brown sugar flavor without having to use brown sugar and having to have like several different types of sugar at your disposal. You know, basically all brown sugar is just the sugar that hasn't had all the molasses stripped from it yet. Or in some cases, it's sugar that has been refined and then has had molasses added back into it. That's the case with like turbinado sugar, like that quote unquote sugar in the raw stuff, which it's like, I think extremely deceptive because it's actually like the least raw and unprocessed sugar of all of them. It's like refined white sugar that they've like reformulated into those funny little cylindrical shapes with added molasses. So it's kind of like not raw by any, it's like a pretty processed sugar. So we're just going to keep cooking this again until it's like bubbly and lightly browning. And in the meantime, what we're going to do is lay out our matzah onto a sheet pan like this. And just for like cleanup sake, you may want to add parchment to it just because like some of this caramel and chocolate's going to drip out and make a mess. And like that's the other joy of having parchment paper at your disposal is just that you don't have to worry as much about like scrubbing the pan when stuff gets stuck to it. And I'm lazy. Like I don't really want to be doing that all day. So just get them laid out because what we're going to do is we're going to spread first the caramel around the top. And then while that caramel's still hot, then we're going to add our chocolate chips to it. And again, that's why like using these super mini ones is great because just from the heat of the caramel, these are small enough that they'll mostly melt down. And it's not important for them to be like perfectly neat. I think that adds to like the appeal of these. If they look a little bit messy and like you can see some caramel seeping through and some chocolate and some pecans and everything, it's just like in general a little bit more appetizing, I think. So let's take a look at how this is doing. I'm just going to heat this a little further. And you can see a caramel made that's fattier is going to have like more, like the sugar is going to be more at the bottom and more of the oil will rise to the top until they become like a little bit emulsified from the caramelization of the sugar. And let's take a look now at our popcorn. This is starting to look pretty darn pleasant. You all see that? That's pretty nice. Yes, indeed. Ooh, and it'll be pretty darn hot out of the oven. But that's really good. It has such a nice buttery kind of flavor to it. And that also you could add different kinds of nuts to. Chopped macadamias would be very nice in it. Play around with it and see how you like it best. And we're going to keep this going a little bit longer. In the meantime, what we can do is probably go ahead and form some of our Sambuca cookies and get our granola in the oven. All right, so for the Sambuca cookies, we're going to take this powdered sugar and keep it in a bowl like that. And then, hold on a second. All right, cool. So this looks like it's now ready to be handled, this Sambuca dough. And let me just grab the parchment lined sheet pan. So what I like to do is just roll a ball of the cookie dough like that and press it into the, because as the fats of the cookie melt and it spreads, especially from like the melting of the chocolate that's in the dough, it's going to spread apart, right? And just the powdered sugar that's really the powdered sugar that's just on the surface, as it spreads apart, is going to form all kinds of like pretty looking cracks and stuff like that. And just kind of give these some space to spread out. It won't be like crazy, but you know, you don't want them to be like right up on each other. Cool. I'm just going to do like half a dozen of these just to demonstrate for you guys, so you don't have to see me rolling like cookies for the next 20 minutes or anything. All right, that's probably good. Okay, so this one I'm going to add a little more sugar to. Yeah, and then I'm going to go ahead and pop those in the oven. Okay, let's take a look at our caramel. This is looking nice. Cool. All right, so we're going to grab our matzah and we're going to grab our caramel. And then the thing here is that this is also going to cook a little bit further in the oven. I love the smell of caramel. It's so delightful. Anybody got any kind of questions about stuff? Y'all are okay? And this isn't going to need too long in the oven. What we really want is for this caramel to be kind of like bubbly and like kind of crackly looking. And then it's going to really be significantly hot enough to melt the chocolate and everything, and for it to set up kind of like almost like a toffee on the matzah itself. And then you can break it apart and put it into little cookie tins or what have you. Yeah, you could probably do this using saltines, but it's kind of nice with the matzah, I think. And it's a little bit easier to handle because these are whole big sheets, rather than like having to like spread these out on a little 2-inch square. It might be like a little bit more of a pain in the butt. So I'm gonna go ahead and now pop these in the oven. All right. And that almost does it. We just have to wait for a couple of these things to come out of the oven. In the meantime, I got a couple different announcements to make for you folks. One is that I just started offering like a subscription to my classes, which includes classes like this, these like kind of short workshop-y classes, and the like paid classes, which end up being like almost $50 when you buy them through Eventbrite. I think it ends up being like 49 something. And the subscription I'm doing right now is significantly discounted. I think it's like 34% off, and you get like all these extra classes thrown in. I think I included a link for it in the recipes I sent you all for today's class. Also, Veganuary is coming up in January. It's the whole month of January. Like you basically get recipes sent to you every day, and there's a couple classes involved. And this year I'm doing it both, like there's a kind of free tier of it where you can just take it, and that's actually super nice and like kind of geared towards beginners. Like it's every day you get like a recipe that's going to just be 7 ingredients or less, which was a real challenge for me to write all those, because I tend to make like more complicated food, and I use a lot of different spices and seasonings. So it was really like a fun challenge for me to write like super simplified recipes. But it was something from last year a lot of people asked about who took that program, because some people liked the like chefier stuff in it, and some people were just like, I'm new to making vegan food. Can you like show me how to make hummus? Can you show me how to make chocolate pudding? Like, so yeah, the Veganuary class has like, you can take it for free or throw me a donation for it to get that like 7 ingredients recipes every day. Or there's like a paid tier of it where you get like 3 recipes every day, and some of them are like, they're not crazy, but some of them are more advanced, and there's like a couple cooking videos a week, and there's a couple like full-on live classes included in that tier. And then also next weekend, we're doing like a whole Christmas dinner cooking class, which should be super, super good. And those of you who took today's class, I sent you all a discount for that class if you want to take it. That's just about it. So let's take a look at our granola. It should just be almost done. Done enough, at least for me to show you how it's looking. Yeah, it's looking pretty good. I'm going to actually flip this around and bake it just a little bit longer while our Sambuca cookies bake. So just use like a nice sharp spatula, like something super thin like that for flipping this. This is almost there. You can feel there's a little bit of moisture left in it. And basically all we're going to do is cook this until it's kind of golden brown. And at that point, as it cools and releases its final little bit of steam, at that point we're going to scatter all the dried figs and cranberries onto it, because they'll get kind of nicely plumped up from the steam of this cooling. And that, rather than getting like all dried out and what have you from being cooked with the granola. Let me toss that in the oven. And yeah, let's take a look at this matzo crack stuff. So this looks pretty darn good. We're going to go ahead now and add our chocolate chips. And once these are mixed up and we add our pecans and our coarse sea salt to it, I like to let this cool actually at room temperature. Some people who make this like to do it by refrigerating it, but I think that kind of kills the whole essence of what this is about by having like, you want that really nice crisp toasted matzah that's like the base of it. And when you refrigerate it, the moisture of your fridge like wicks right into that matzah and makes it like a little bit, if not soggy, like at least chewy, which is kind of like ruins the whole vibe. Like I want it to be nice and crispy at the bottom and have this like caramel layer and chocolate layer and the nuts. Like it's really a texture thing, this thing is. And you don't have to be Jewish to eat matzah. It's freaking yummy. At least done up like this, it sure is. And I'm not mad about eating matzah either, like au natural. Like I'm kind of about matzah. And this Streitz matzah, what I did recommend to you folks to use in this recipe, which you can totally use like Manischewitz matzah or whatever matzah is available to you. The Streitz is maybe it's just like a childhood memory thing for me, but I really think it's the best. My dad used to always bring me to the Streitz Matzah factory on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. Like every Passover, we would like go there and pick up tons and tons of matzah. And it was so cool. Like they had these like ancient special matzah ovens like that looked like prehistoric and were covered in like decades of matzah dust and stuff. And like since a few years ago, I think maybe 5 or 6 years ago, they like closed that place down and like, you know, moved to like a big facility they built in New Jersey. But I still think it is the best matzah around. So while this is hot and sticky, we're going to add our toasted pecan pieces and be generous about them because they are very yummy. All right. And again, like you can be kind of like uneven. It's kind of cool. Like some pieces have more and some pieces have less. And it's okay. It's okay to let things be like a little bit natural. Hold on one second. Let me grab my salt. So this is an application you really want to use like a bigger like either flakier salt or like a coarser kind of sea salt like this. I use like a pink like Himalayan salt for a lot of my cooking personally, but this is like one of the things that I think is really nice to be finished off with, you know, kind of a big chunky or flaky salt like that. It's nice where it remains like kind of crystallized on the top, and it gives you that kind of salted caramel flavor. And yeah, that's about that. So I'm just going to let this now cool to room temperature at room temperature again, so it doesn't get like soggy from being refrigerated, and that will be after this class because this class is like basically over at this point. But you're going to have to take it from me that this will harden really nicely. Once that chocolate sets up, you should be able to break it apart into any kind of little pieces and either just have it like live on its own as a standalone thing. Like you could make, get like some cookie tins and fill it just like that, or bags or what have you. Or you could like include it in the rest of like an assortment of little holiday treat things. Let's take a look now at our granola, and you can see now the color of this is really perfect now. I don't know if these cameras pick it up so nicely, but it's really like a nice light golden brown. You can see it's a little darker in some spots, but it's not burnt anywhere. That's kind of what we want. So just keep an eye on it when you cook it. You know, there's no harm in taking it out and checking it and tossing it around. And if you want to give it another couple more minutes, you can. So yeah, we're going to then add all of our fruit and stuff to it. Cranberries and chopped up figs. And again, you could totally use, you know, goji berries or Hunza raisins or any other fun stuff. But this way, like it's going to steam these fruits and it's just going to make it more pleasant all around. But it really does smell pretty darn good. All right, Last thing that we've just been waiting for in the oven are these Sambuca cookies, and these still need a minute, but you can start to see how they're like cracking apart and how pretty that like powdered sugar look is. I'm gonna pop these back in the oven for another few minutes. And any final questions, any problems, any arguments? What, do you like cookies? Do you hate cookies? I hope it's not a controversy, because this world needs a considerably less controversy. Everybody's mad about I'm sure there's somebody mad about that I taught a free or donation-based cookie class. And I'll tell you who it isn't. It's this guy who's trying to steal all the ingredients. Lovely to hang out with you folks this afternoon. I hope to see you folks next week in the Christmas dinner class. Or if not, definitely take the Veganuary thing, because you could take it like straight up for free. Like, you'd be a downright doofus. You'd be a Wild West buffoon to not take the free thing. But if you have the means and want to pay for the full thing, that's great too. Anyhow, wishing you all a magnificent rest of your weekend, and toodaloo!